So again, welcome. This is Matt Buckman on the line. For those of you who just joined, we're going to be discussing the penalty kick. Again, a bit of a laws of a game refresher, and then we'll get into some of the changes that have come about more recently with potential sanctions when people are guilty of breaking some of the rules. So give me a second. Okay, so again, we're going to go through the penalty kick. Again, this is not to be confused with kicks from the mark, which is the tie-breaking procedure we use at the end of games. This is when a penalty kick is awarded if a player commits a direct free kick offense inside their own penalty area or off the field as part of play, as outlined in laws 12 and 13. So again, this is penalty kicks are only awarded for direct free kick offenses. So I thought it would be good just to take a step back really quickly and look at the direct free kick offenses that we can have, just so that we are aware of what kinds of fouls we can give penalty kicks for. So again, direct free kick offenses. A direct free kick is awarded if the player commits any of the following offenses: charging, jumping at an opponent, kicking or attempting to kick an opponent, pushing, striking or attempting to strike, and this does include headbutts, tackles and challenges, and trips or attempts to trips. So I think we can also consider within pushing here, holding. These are going to be upper body fouls. We also have handball offenses, except for the goalkeeper within their penalty area, holding, impeding an opponent with contact. It's important to note, if we have contact between two players and you call a foul, it will always be a direct free kick or a penalty kick. The impeding an opponent with no contact is where we get an indirect free kick. So I know there's some confusion on that at times. We tend to give indirect free kicks more frequently than we should. So the important thing to note here is that if contact between two players occurs and you deem it to be unfair, it's almost always going to be a direct free kick. If a player impedes an opponent without contact, that's when we have an indirect free kick. Biting or spitting. Biting was added courtesy of Luis Suarez and the incident a number of years ago. And then throwing an object at the ball, an opponent, or a match official. So these are the circumstances under which we would have a direct free kick. Again, charging, jumping at, kicking or attempting to kick, pushing, striking or attempting to strike, tackles or challenges, trips or attempts to trip, as well as handballs, holding, impeding an opponent with contact, biting or spitting, or throwing something. These are all circumstances where we would have a direct free kick. If it happens within the penalty area, then we are going to have a penalty kick. So again, getting back to some of our laws, and for anybody who's curious, this is the IFAB website. This is a very nice and easy way to review the laws of the game. If you go back to the very beginning here, you've got introduction, notes on the laws, and then the laws right here. And then once you click there, you jump right into the 17 laws. So we're going to go back to penalty kick and remind ourselves again, a penalty kick is awarded if a player commits a direct free kick offense inside their own penalty area. So we're going to talk about the procedure. Hold on really quickly. We have a question. Yes, Peter, thank you. The IFAB has a Laws of the Game app, which is also great. You can use it on your phone. Exactly. So first, we're going to talk about our procedure for giving a free kick, or excuse me, for giving or awarding a penalty kick. We'll go and look at a couple of clips that I've pulled out for the kinds of fouls you want to be looking at for penalty kicks, just a couple of examples. We'll watch the replay here in a second, but this will be a very standard holding foul. After some discussion, of course. So we're going to watch number 5 here. So this is a pretty typical hold. So you can see here, he's got his arms wrapped around him, keeps him from jumping to challenge from the ball. That's a holding foul inside the penalty area. We would give a direct free kick for that outside the penalty area. So we'll award a direct free kick, or excuse me, a penalty kick for this when it's inside the penalty area. Another example. Again, we'll see some replays. We're looking down here. So you can see pretty clear holding, two players actually holding on to the attacker. This is the best view of it. Holding him, not letting him jump. Obvious holding here. We need to award a penalty kick. So you can see here the guy's holding on. He's trying to work his way through. So pretty clear penalty kick. And then the last one of my personal favorites. And we'll get a good replay. So you can see here down in the bottom right-hand screen, player jumps out, knocks the ball down with the arm. So a good handball example. So these are all things, they happen out in the middle of the field. We give a direct free kick. If they happen inside the penalty area, we give a penalty kick. So moving on to what we do in administering a penalty kick. First of all, the ball must be stationary on the penalty mark. And a new addition to the laws this year, the goalpost, the crossbar, and the goal net must not be moving. Perhaps if you're refereeing adult games or some bigger youth players, they might jump up and down and hit that crossbar. That will make it shake. It'll make the net shake. Those are all distractions. So IFAB now says not only must the ball be stationary on the penalty mark, the goalposts, the crossbar, and the goal net must not be moving. If a goalkeeper jumps up and down and hits them or pulls on the net or does anything like that, just stop for a moment, ask the goalkeeper not to do that, wait till it stops moving around, and then go ahead and blow the whistle to start the penalty kick. The player taking the penalty kick must be clearly identified. So it must be very obvious for all parties involved who is taking the penalty kick. More often than not, it's easy to see, but if for some reason you're not able to see that, then make sure you point out or ask who is taking the kick and have them identify themselves. The defending goalkeeper must remain on the goal line, facing the kicker, between the two goalposts, and again, without touching the goalpost, crossbar, or the goal net until the ball has been kicked. So the most recent change now is that the goalkeeper must have, when it's down here a little bit, the goalkeeper must have at least part of one foot touching or in line with the goal line. So it used to be both feet were required, but it's sort of natural for a goalkeeper to want to come forward a little bit with the taking of a penalty kick. And so IFAB modified the laws to allow them to take one step forward with one foot, but as long as the back foot or the second foot is still on line or in line with the goal line, they are safe. So the defending goalkeeper must remain on the goal line. He must be facing the kicker between the goalposts and without touching either the goal, the crossbar, or the net. The other players, besides the kicker and the goalkeeper, must be at least 10 yards from the penalty mark. So that's going to be anywhere outside the penalty area or outside that D at the top, the little half arc at the top of the penalty area. That's actually why that little half circle is there. That is the 10-yard mark from the penalty mark. So all players, other than the kicker and the goalkeeper, must be either outside the penalty area or outside that arc near the top of the penalty area. They also must be behind the penalty mark. So if a player goes around the side of the penalty area, they're not allowed to go any closer to the goal line than the penalty mark. Sometimes you'll see a player try to go stand on the goal line outside the penalty area to try to distract the player taking the penalty kick. So they must be behind the penalty mark, no closer than 12 yards to the goal line, no matter where they are on the field. They must be inside the field of play. That seems obvious. And they must be outside the penalty area. And I'll show you a picture here in a moment to show all the various components that we're talking about. So after all players have taken positions in accordance with this law, then the referee signals for the penalty kick to be taken. It's oftentimes wise to check in with the goalkeeper just to make sure they're ready before you blow the whistle. So check in on all the players, make sure everybody's where they're supposed to be, and then check with the goalkeeper, make sure they're ready to go. Then you can blow the whistle to start. The player taking the penalty kick must kick the ball forward. Now, they are allowed to backheel the ball if they want to spin around and put their back to the goal. I don't know why they would do that, but sometimes you see someone try to be fancy. But the ball must go forward. Every once in a while, you'll see a team try to do a trick play on a penalty kick where they pass it to somebody else who shoots. I, again, don't know why they would do that, but you see it happen from time to time. It's legal as long as the ball rolls forward and as long as all players remain outside the penalty area until that ball is kicked. So the big thing is the ball must be rolling forward. It must be played forward when the penalty kick is taken. And we'll get to a different slide here where we talk about the various offenses and sanctions that we can offer. When the ball is kicked, as we have discussed, the goalkeeper must have at least part of one foot touching or in line with the goal line. An explanation here in more detail. Goalkeepers are not permitted to stand in front of or behind the line. They must be on the line when it starts. Sometimes you'll see a goalkeeper that will stand inside the goal so that they can be coming forward. Now, because they're allowed to take a step forward, they need to start directly on the goal line. So let's make sure the goalkeepers are standing on the goal line, not behind it or in front of it. Allowing the goalkeeper to have one foot touching the goal line when the penalty kick is taken is a more practical approach, as it is easier to identify than if both feet are not on the goal line. So again, it used to be that the goalkeeper had to keep both feet on the line, and in all honesty, we usually didn't worry too much about it. Now they're giving the goalkeeper the ability to come forward while still keeping part of a foot on the line. I'm going to pause here for questions. What's the best way to spot a penalty kick? Mason, I'm not sure what you mean by that. So if you could phrase the question a different way so that I understand what you're talking about. A question here, what do you do if the ball doesn't go forward? We will get to that when we talk about offenses and sanctions. All right. Where do the referee and AR position themselves? We will get to that. Like I said, I've got a picture here, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Any questions on anything we've discussed so far? Okay, so a question from Mason, like how to spot one and make sure it's a penalty kick. We'll cover that in a different segment. That's talking about foul recognition and how to identify fouls. That's not the purpose of this presentation tonight. This is more about administering a penalty kick and making sure that we're doing it correctly when it happens. We had a question here. Okay, good. That one we already answered. So moving on the last couple of points here. The ball is in play when it has been kicked and clearly moves. That is language that is newer to the laws of the game. It used to be that the ball had to roll a certain distance or et cetera, et cetera. Now they've simplified it by saying the ball is in play when it is kicked and it clearly moves. So it just needs to clearly moves a little bit for that. The kicker who plays the ball must not play the ball again until it has touched another player. So just like with free kicks out in the middle of the field, once the player has touched the ball once, they cannot play the ball again until it has been touched by another player. Two circumstances where that can happen. One is if for some reason the player duffs the kick a little bit, touches it, and wants to kick it again. They're not allowed to do that. The more common one, though, is if they take the shot, it hits a crossbar or a goalpost without touching the goalkeeper and comes directly back to them. If they kick it a second time, they're not allowed to do that. Remember, they can only kick the ball a second time if it has been touched by another player first. And so if the ball comes off of the goalpost from a penalty kick, they're not allowed to kick it a second time. And again, we'll talk about what the repercussions are for that in just a moment. Question here, can the player kick the ball a little bit forward without deliberately trying to score? Yes, they can. They just can't kick it a second time. So another player would have to touch it this time. And then lastly, the penalty kick is completed when the ball stops moving, goes out of play, or the referee stops play for an offense. One last little thing here, additional time is allowed for a penalty kick to be taken and completed at the end of each half or at extra time. So the reason we had this thing here, the penalty kick is completed when the ball stops moving, goes out of play, or the referee stops play for any offense, is because if you're into stoppage time or if you call a penalty kick with 15 seconds left on the clock, it's going to be impossible to set everything up the way that it needs to be and administer that penalty kick in 15 minutes. So we allow for additional time to be able to take that penalty kick, and that additional time is considered over when the penalty kick is completed. Therefore, when the ball stops moving, when it goes out of play, or when the referee stops play for an offense. That's how we consider the penalty kick to be over. So a thing you might see happen is the player may shoot, it may hit the goalkeeper, go straight up in the air, spinning backwards, bounce on the ground, and then go in the goal under its own volition. We would consider that penalty kick to be still active until the ball stops moving. So that's why that language is written into the laws of the game. Because if you allow a penalty kick in additional time, or if you give additional time for the taking of the penalty kick, we need to better define when that penalty kick has actually been completed. So that's why that information is in the laws. Any questions at this point on stuff we've already talked about? Question here, ball stops moving, the player touches the ball forward 6 inches and it stops. That's correct. The taking of the penalty kick, if we're in additional time, means one player gets to kick the ball, it gets to go on goal, and once that has been completed, it's over. If for some reason they kick the ball 6 inches and it stops, then per the laws of the game, the ball has stopped moving, which means the penalty kick is over, and you would blow the whistle. But again, that's we're talking about only when we're in additional time. Only when you've called a penalty kick right at the end of a half and you have to allow for more time for the penalty kick to be taken. Otherwise, in more normal circumstances, either the goalkeeper is going to save it, which means the play is now active, and if the ball's back in play, we just keep playing, or the ball's going to go wide, or it's going to go out of play or something like that, and you'll have a corner kick or a goal kick. In a normal game, whatever the outcome of the kick is, you're just going to continue with play as is. Be it if the ball's back in play, we keep going, or if it goes out of bounds, we do the appropriate restart, just like we would any other goal kick or corner kick. So it's highly unusual to have a penalty kick taken in additional time, but it does happen from time to time, so we need to be aware of what to do when it happens. All right, let me take just a moment and show you a diagram now of what it looks like. And again, this is on the IFAB website or on the app, you can find this. So we're looking under penalty kick here. The AR must be positioned at the intersection of the goal line and the penalty area. So that's this person right here. If we call a penalty kick during a game, the AR moves from the corner up to this spot so that they can more easily view the goalkeeper. And we'll talk about roles of the various positions here in a moment. The referee is going to take up this position. We'll talk about why here in a second. We need to clearly identify the shooter. Now, every once in a while, we have a shooter that wants to run from way back here. That's okay. We just need to have them identify themselves so that the goalkeeper knows who is taking the shot. It is not mandatory that the kicker be inside the penalty area or at a specific place. The kicker is allowed to be anywhere as long as we're able to clearly identify them. And then as you can see here, all the rest of the defenders and the attackers must be outside the penalty area and outside this arc. Sometimes we call this the D because it looks like a D. And so the reason this exists is because it is on a 10-yard radius from the penalty spot. So the penalty spot to any point on this arc is going to be 10 yards. So at the taking of a penalty kick, players must be outside the normal penalty area and also outside this D. Feet on the line. Remember that lines are boundaries for part of the area that they contain. So they need to have their feet outside the line, not on the line. Sometimes you'll have players jockey to stand in front of each other here. We just need to pay attention that they're not doing anything inappropriate. Now, the reason that the referee stands here is because their primary responsibility is to watch both the shooter and for potential encroachment from these players. Now, these players on the outside are not allowed into the penalty area until the ball has already been kicked. And so it's the referee's duty when standing here to keep their eye on the players outside the penalty area. You see a lot of referees take a slightly wider position than this up here so that they can see all of the players along this boundary line and know if anybody runs into the penalty area too soon. So the primary duty of the referee in the taking of a penalty kick is to watch for two things. One, players on the outside of the penalty area staying outside the penalty area until the ball has been kicked, and also watching the player taking the shot to make sure they don't do anything they're not allowed to do. Most specifically, they're not allowed to run up to the ball and fake a shot and run past it. That's the main thing. And we'll get to what the sanctions are for that in a moment. And then the assistant referee's primary duty is to watch the goalkeeper to make sure they don't come off the line before the ball is shot, and then to serve as a goal line judge in case the ball hits the crossbar or the posts and comes into the goal and back out. So AR has two primary duties. One is to watch for the goalkeeper. That's usually the most important one. And then to be a goal line judge in the rare occasion the ball goes into the goal and back out for some reason. So talking about mechanics here, usually what we ask the assistant referee to do if the goalkeeper has come off the line is to raise their flag to indicate that to the referee. The referee, more often than not, when we're going to call this, it's because the goalkeeper has saved it and they might be a little distracted trying to get out of the way. So ARs, we need to raise our flag to indicate to the referee that the goalkeeper has stepped out off the line before the shot was taken. And again, remember, the goalkeeper only has to have 1 foot on the goal line or in line with the goal line at the time the ball is kicked. So what we want to do here as assistant referees is keep our eyes on the goalkeeper's feet and listen for the ball being kicked. We're going to be able to hear it kicked very easily from this distance. And so we want to watch the goalkeeper and listen for the ball being kicked and make sure the goalkeeper's at least 1 foot is still on the line at the time that we hear the ball being kicked. If the goalkeeper's foot is not still on the line, then we raise the flag to indicate to the referee that a goalkeeper infraction has taken place. So referees, we need to make sure we talk about this with our ARs before the game, and we need to make sure if the goalkeeper saves it, that we pay attention to the AR. ARs, if the ball goes in the net or if the goalkeeper saves it legitimately without any offense, you want to immediately backpedal out to this line. Don't turn your back and run because there are players here you need to be paying attention to. So backpedal back to the touchline, keeping your eyes on active play. Couple of questions here. What is the proper positioning for a two-man? Very, very good question. It will be the same. So the referee who is the lead referee in this situation, the one who was up to the front and over on this side, will come down to the goal line to watch for the goalkeeper and any goal line infractions. And the trail referee, the one who would normally be in the other half, would be the person to administer this role. That way, as soon as the ball is back in play, you can quickly and easily get back into your normal diagonal positions. Question here, many referees give instructions to assistant referees to signal the goalie encroachment differently, step in the field, flag at the waist. Can I comment on that? Yes, there have been a number of different instructions over a period of a number of years, and they move quite often, and different ideas come about at different times. That's why we need to have the pregame. So if the referee asks you to do something like drape the flag across your waist or something like that, go ahead and do what they ask you to do. There's no problem there. It's just a method of communication. Obviously, if they ask you to do a cartwheel or a handstand or something like that, perhaps we can ask them to use a different method of communication. But if they ask you to do something like stepping onto the field, a flag at the waist, etc., go ahead and do what they ask you to do. At the professional level, we're moving more towards making the AR put the flag up because, one, we want the AR to have the responsibility, and sometimes referees will say they didn't see it as a way to not have to call it, but also it can legitimately be difficult if the ball rebounds back into play, the referee scrambling to get out of the way, the referee is focused on what happens next in the penalty area, there might be another foul, who knows what might happen. It's easy for the for the referee to miss a more subtle signal, whereas the flag going up is pretty obvious. But again, if you're an AR and a referee asks you to do something different, that's not a problem. Just do whatever they ask you to do on the day. Last question here, what is the correct restart if the goalkeeper steps off the line? I will get to that here in a moment when we talk about offenses and sanctions. Any other questions or comments on the positioning, what this needs to look like, and what our duties are while this is happening? Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and go back to the laws then and move us along to the various offenses. So I'm going to leave this for a moment. It's a lot to take in. There's actually a summary table that is much easier to sort of digest all this information, because the way it's written out, it has to be written obviously. We don't want to, it's a lot to try to take in. So I'll go to the summary table here in a minute, and then we'll come back to this. So the summary table, this is a list of potential things that can happen, how it can happen, and what our recourse is when they happen. So if we have encroachment by an attacking player, meaning one of those players who was outside the penalty area and comes into the penalty area before the kick is taken, if the goal is scored, we retake the penalty kick. If no goal is scored, meaning it goes wide or the goalkeeper saves it, then we have an indirect free kick at the spot of the foul for the defending team. The thought here is that we always want to go one step down in our penalizing. So if they have a goal get scored, the penalty for the team who encroaches, if the attacking team, is that they have the goal taken away and they have to retake the penalty kick. If they don't score the goal, then we don't have a goal to take away and make them redo it. We have an indirect free kick to restart the game. The reason that we do the indirect free kick is sometimes we might have an attacking player encroach, and then the goalkeeper saves the ball back into live play, and that encroaching player then kicks the ball into the back of the net. So we want to stop play and give an indirect free kick if the ball goes out of bounds, or goes back into play. Question here, how strict should we be on encroachment? And if a different player scores on a rebound, does that count as goal or no goal? Good questions here. Strictness on encroachment, it's kind of up to you on the day, honestly. I would suggest you be strict with it, because if you're not strict with it, then there's a culture and some of not paying attention to that law, and then maybe they keep breaking that rule and it's unfair. The next question I think is a better question there. If a different player scores from a rebound, does that count as a goal or no goal? So the penalty kick, when it's taken, is either going to go into the net or not. That is what we consider the outcome of the penalty kick. Now, if it gets saved or if it comes off the goalpost and a different player kicks the ball, that's no longer the penalty kick, that's live play. And so we consider the outcome of the penalty kick to be what happened when the player who took the penalty kick shot the ball. And if the ball went into the net, that's a goal. If it didn't go into the net right away, then that's no goal, and anything happens after that is active play. Question here, indirect free kick from where? I said right when I explained this that it is from the spot that the attacking player encroaches. So wherever they encroached is where the indirect free kick is taken. So again, encroachment by an attacking player. If the goal is scored, we take the goal away and we retake the penalty kick. If there is no goal scored, we give an indirect free kick to the defending team at the spot of the encroachment. So encroachment by a defending player, if the ball goes into the goal, goal. We don't want to make the attacking, we don't want to penalize the attacking team by making them retake the kick when it was a defending player who committed some sort of offense. So if the ball goes in the back of the net, we don't worry about it. Goal is awarded, no problem. If a defending player encroaches, but the goal is not scored on the penalty kick, then we're going to retake the penalty kick. Now, a little bit of common sense here. If you have encroachment by a defending player and the ball is saved by the goalkeeper and then the attacker just kicks it right back into the goal again, let's use a little common sense. Let's let the goal stand. But if we have encroachment by a defending player and the goalkeeper saves it and it goes out of bounds, or the goalkeeper saves it and the defender clears it, we want to retake the penalty kick because the defending player has cheated. What happens if there is another foul by the defensive team during the penalty kick? So that's a little bit difficult. If we have some sort of foul that happens, we have to remember that the ball is not in play until it's been kicked or clearly moves. And so a lot of it is going to depend on what happens, or excuse me, when it happens. So again, the question is, what happens if there is another foul by the defensive team during the penalty kick? If it's during the run-up to the penalty kick, meaning the ball has not yet been kicked, then the ball is not in play yet, and we can stop, blow the whistle, do whatever we need to do, punish the defending team however we need to, if it's a yellow card, whatever it may be, and then go back and take the penalty kick because it has not yet been taken. If it's already been kicked, meaning the ball has been kicked and then we have a foul, then we can go ahead and either award the goal and then deal with the defender, or if it comes out and is, saved out into active play or whatever, then we can award the foul at that point if we want to, wherever the foul happened. You don't see that too often, so I don't want to get in the weeds on that one too much, but that's how we want to handle that. Question here, if there is simultaneous encroachment by the offense and the defense and no goal, what do? We punish the attacker. We'll get to that in the more written laws of the game. We always will punish the attacker if there is encroachment from both of them. Moving on to the next one here, offense by a goalkeeper. So if a goal is scored, the goalkeeper encroaches or comes off the line early and the goal is scored, then we award the goal. If the goalkeeper saves it, or if the ball goes wide and the goalkeeper has come off the line, the penalty for that is we retake the penalty kick and we caution the goalkeeper. I want to make clear, if you're going to call this, you are required to give the goalkeeper a yellow card. It's not, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not an option. It's not subjective. If you call this against the goalkeeper, you must caution the goalkeeper. So it's important, maybe right before you take the kick, to go to the goalkeeper and say, please stay on the line, because if you come off, I have to give you a yellow card. It's even more important if the goalkeeper already has a yellow card in the game for some reason, to go to them and say, you must stay on the line, because if you come off, I have to give you a yellow card. So again, offense by the goalkeeper. If the goal is scored, we don't worry about it. We give them the goal. If we decide to blow the whistle because no goal has been scored, then we retake the penalty kick and we caution the goalkeeper. If the ball is kicked backwards, meaning the player who kicks the penalty kick for some reason decides to kick it backwards, no matter what happens, we have an indirect free kick. So if they put the ball into play and it goes backwards from the penalty kick, blow the whistle right away, indirect free kick for the defense. Pretty straightforward. Illegal feinting. Now, this is a feint by an attacking player, meaning they run up towards the ball and they pretend to kick it, which puts the goalkeeper off, and then they kick it. If that happens, we have an indirect free kick and we caution the kicker. There's no circumstance where they're allowed to do that and they retake the penalty kick. Now, the threshold we want to use for this, they're allowed to stutter step, stop and start on their way up to the ball, but once they get to the ball, they must kick it. That's the threshold we want to use. The most common one you'll see, and again, this happens very, very infrequently, but when it does happen, the most common way we see it is a player will run up to the ball, swing their foot at it over the top of it on purpose, not actually kick the ball, but swing their foot past it, which makes the goalkeeper dive, and then they'll kick the ball into the goal after the goalkeeper has dived. That is an illegal feint. We don't want to allow that to happen. If that happens in your game, blow the whistle right away. Indirect free kick coming out for the defending team, and a caution to the kicker. If we have the wrong kicker take the kick, meaning we have one player identified and then somebody runs up and takes it, that's not that player, no matter if the ball goes in the goal or not, we are going to issue an indirect free kick, and we're going to caution the player who actually kicked the ball. We only caution the wrong kicker on this one. And then lastly, when we have both the goalkeeper and the kicker at the same time, if the goal is scored, meaning both the goalkeeper has come off and the kicker has committed some sort of infraction, first of all, that's a unicorn. I've never seen it happen before, so I hope it won't happen to anybody here. But if it does, you have an indirect free kick, you punish the attacker, and you give a caution to the kicker. So again, if both people, the goalkeeper and the kicker, are guilty, if the goal gets scored, you give an indirect free kick, which means you negate the goal, and you caution the kicker. Notice that is the same as the illegal feinting. So basically, anytime you have an attacking player or the shooter do an illegal feint, no matter what the goalkeeper did, you're going to caution the kicker and give an indirect free kick. So if the kicker does something illegal, you're going to caution the kicker and give an indirect free kick. That's a nice, simple way to remember it. If for some reason both of them do it and the ball does not go into the goal, retake the goal and caution for the kicker and the goalkeeper both. So we had a question here in the last situation, does the goal count? No, because you're giving an indirect free kick to the defensive team, so no goal. So again, if both the kicker and the goalkeeper are guilty, but the goal does not go, or the ball does not go in the net, we want to retake the kick, and you give both of them a caution. So those are the kinds of scenarios we're going to look at. That's a nice little quick cheat sheet there. I would recommend, if you have a moment, to screenshot this. I'm going to leave this up here for about 15 or 20 seconds to let you screenshot what's on the screen right now, take a picture of it, anything like that, because this is a nice, easy chart to memorize, to print out and keep in your pocket in case this happens, because again, this can be really difficult in the moment to remember. And so have this in your bag, have this in your pocket. If something happens and you're not sure what to do, stop the game and go back and reference this if you need to. Just make sure you get it right. This is an important thing to get right, so we want to make sure that we get it right, however you have to do that. So a question here, how should you give two people yellow cards at the same time? You would walk up to the first one, show the yellow card, put it back down, walk over to the second one, show the yellow card, put it back down. Nice and simple. Don't need to overcomplicate it. Just issue the card to both of them, just like you would issue it to one of them. Any questions on this summary chart before we return back to the laws and read through a little bit more and connect it back to this summary chart? All right, I'm going to give you 10 more seconds to screenshot this or take a picture. All right. And now going back to the various offenses. So if before the ball is in play, one of the following occurs: the player taking the penalty kick or a teammate offends. So again, this is the attacking team. Anytime the attacking team commits an offense, aside from the illegal feint, which we know, if the ball enters the goal, the kick is retaken. If the ball does not enter the goal, the referee stops play and restarts with an indirect kick. Except for the following, in which case we'll restart with an indirect free kick, regardless of whether a goal is scored. Penalty kick is kicked backwards, a teammate of the identified kicker takes the kick, or feinting. So in these three scenarios, as we saw on that little chart, we give an indirect free kick regardless of the outcome of the kick. For these two scenarios up here, if the ball goes in the net, we retake the kick. If the ball does not go into the net, we start with an indirect free kick. If the goalkeeper or a teammate offends, meaning if this is the defensive team now, if the defensive team commits the offense, if the ball enters the goal, we award the goal and we don't worry about it. If the ball does not enter the goal, the kick is retaken and the goalkeeper is cautioned. If a player from both teams offends the laws of the game, the kick is retaken unless a player commits a more serious offense, i.e. the illegal feinting. So if we have two players go in or encroach, we're going to retake the kick. If both the goalkeeper and the kicker committed offense at the same time, if the kick is missed or saved, the kick is retaken. If the kick is scored, the goal is disallowed, the kicker is cautioned. Again, this is all on that chart. And then a few things here. If after the penalty kick has been taken, the kicker touches the ball again before it has touched another player, we give an indirect free kick. If it's a handball, meaning they touch it with their hand, of course, it would be a direct free kick. But if they touch the ball a second time before it has touched another player, we give an indirect free kick. If the ball is touched by an outside agent as it moves forward, this is a good fun one. An outside agent could be somebody's dog runs onto the field, somebody's parent runs onto the field, somebody's kid's sister runs onto the field, anything that's not a player. If anything from outside the field comes on the field and touches the ball, we retake the kick unless the ball is going into the goal and the interference does not prevent the goalkeeper or a defending player from playing the ball, in which case we award the goal if the ball enters the goal, even if contact was made. So again, I'm going to break that down a little bit. Shooter takes a shot, takes a shot to the right side of the goal, the goalkeeper dives to the left side of the goal. If the ball was going into the net, little Susie runs on the field from behind the goal and touches it, and it still goes into the net. If that ball would have gone into the net anyway, because the goalkeeper had gone to the left and the shooter had gone to the right, we go ahead and award the goal. Because the interference there did not prevent the goalkeeper or anybody else from playing the ball. If the interference was by the attacking team, meaning if it's an attacking team's coach that runs onto the field, or Johnny's mom, and Johnny's the shooter, and the ball is going to go wide, so Johnny's mom pokes her foot in there and kicks the ball in the goal. If that thing happens, then we're going to stop and we're going to retake the kick. Does that make sense for everybody? Any questions on that? We had a question here. What if the goalkeeper dives during the attacker's run-up and the attacker feints towards one side and then shoots for the other? We have to be careful with the word feinting, because feinting is something in the laws of the game that is illegal. They call it an illegal feint. And so that's why I use that threshold that I said a minute ago, which is if they run past the ball, meaning they swing their leg towards the ball and then come back and kick it, that's the one that we want to go back and say that's not allowed. Any other kind of feint, meaning if they want to pretend to kick it one way and kick it the other while still running towards the ball, that's legal and we don't want to worry about it. So any kind of feinting or stutter stepping or anything to try to suggest they're going to go one way and then they go the other, as long as it happens before they get to the ball, that's all okay. The one that we really want to be sensitive to is if they go past the ball. They swing their foot past it, or they act like they're going to kick it, run past it, wait for the goalkeeper to move, and then kick it. We don't want to allow that to happen. All right, and then lastly, if the ball rebounds into the field of play from the goalkeeper, the crossbar, or the goalpost, and then is touched by an outside agent, now the penalty kick is over. you would restart play with a drop ball, because that's what we do when an outside agent comes in and touches the ball. So if the penalty kick has been completed, meaning it's hit the goalkeeper, it's hit the crossbars and has come back into play, and then an outside agent touches it, then it's just active play and we do what we do. Question here, why is the miss rewarded with a retake if the offense is by both the goalkeeper and the kicker? We do that because more than likely the goalkeeper has committed an offense that has led to the kicker missing. And when they have both committed offense and a goal has been scored, the balanced restart there is to retake the kick. So if both commit an offense and the goal is scored, then we want to take the penalty down one, we deny the goal, we move on. If the ball goes in the net, or excuse me, if it misses, then we retake it because it's possible that the goalkeeper's infraction has caused the shooter to miss. And so we can't let the goalkeeper get a benefit from that. Question here, would the drop ball be uncontested because of the new rule? That is correct. So if the if there was an outside agent who touched the ball after the penalty kick was completed inside the penalty area, it would be a drop ball for the goalkeeper because that's what the new law says. So again, this is a lot of verbiage and a lot of what ifs. They have to write this out for the purposes of the law. But what I would suggest you do is really refer back to this summary table, because that's going to give you everything you need to know in a really, really succinct way. This is very clearly spelled out. And again, it's something you can print out and keep in your little book, you know, of where your game card is and all that. It's a very easy thing to keep with you, because again, even the top level referees will struggle a little bit to get this right because there's so many what ifs involved in this. And they don't happen that often. It's not too often we get a penalty kick in a game, and it's even less often that we have an infraction on the penalty kick. And so because of that, I would highly recommend that you just screenshot this or go onto the app yourself or go onto your computer yourself and print this out. Whatever is going to work for you, get a copy of this somehow, even if you write it out somewhere, and keep it in your card book with you so that if it happens in a game, you can blow the whistle, you can stop for a second, reference it, and then make sure you get the restart right. Because this is one of these areas, if you don't get the restart right, the coach might be able to protest the game, and we don't want that to happen. So take as long as you need to get it right and have yourself this little cheat sheet to reference to make sure you get it right. Worst case scenario, if you're not sure and you've got the laws of the game with you, if you've got the laws of the game on your phone, you can go back, ask the coach for a second, run to your bag, check it out, and then come back and restart the game however is appropriate. So make sure you give yourself the time to get this right in a real game. Any other questions about this summary of offenses and sanctions? Okay, so tonight we have gone over, again, the procedure for administering a penalty kick. We've looked at some examples of why we issue penalty kicks. We've looked at the summary of various offenses that you can have and what to do when they happen. And most importantly, we've looked at a diagram of where we go and why we go there and what the duties of both the referee and the assistant referee are at the taking of a penalty kick. So that gets us to the end of what we wanted to talk about tonight. Are there any additional questions on how to administer a penalty kick? Where does the AR run to once a penalty kick is scored? Again, they would just backpedal back to the corner flag and then move up the field. The referee is the one who signals for a goal to be scored here. And so what the referee would do is once the ball goes into the net, they would make eye contact with the AR. And if the AR is not doing the prescribed signal to indicate that some sort of offense by the goalkeeper has taken place, then the referee signals for a goal and the AR backpedals to the corner flag and then runs up the goal line or up the touch line, to take their next position in the game. Can you show how far the other players can be on the side of the penalty box? Yeah, good question. So we talked about the fact that all players must be behind the penalty mark. So what that means, if this is the penalty mark, you want to draw a line horizontally across the field, and players can't be any closer to the goal line than that penalty spot. So if you get players for some reason that want to come around over to here, they can be over here. They just can't pass this line, which is even with the ball or with the penalty mark. So we don't want to let them go any closer to the goal line than that penalty spot if for some reason players want to come over here. So again, if a player tries to stand over here, we don't want to let them do that. They must be behind the ball. Question, does the second AR have any responsibilities? As with anything else, there will be other players on the field that aren't up here right around the penalty area. So your job as the trail AR is to keep your eye on any of the other players on the field while this penalty kick is being administered. Question here from John Tolley. Can we go over the drop ball situation of the goalkeeper? No, because that's under drop balls, and we went over that when we talked about the law changes. So we're only going to talk about penalty kicks here. Any other questions on penalty kicks? All right, then with that, I say thank you for joining us this evening, and have a good night, and Happy New Year to everybody.